place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, even the dogs eat crumbs that fall from their master's table." And then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. Today's reading from Matthew brings into sharp focus some really difficult questions, I think. It's a question that the ancients might have said, who gets to enter the temple? If you understand the process of the Jewish faith, they had inner sanctums that you kept going into, and you had to be qualified to certain degrees before you could get to the next level. And only the high priest could get to the very deepest level. To me, that kind of seems like maybe the question that Matthew's addressing, since he's talking to a Jewish audience this morning. Are some people stopped at the door? Is the temple really a house of prayer for all people? Or just for some people? The Jewish community at the time of Jesus struggled with this question. Was everyone welcome in the temple? The community in Jerusalem had strong voices that sought to restrict who could come into the temple and who could come to the different levels. Only those people who know the rules. Only those people who know how to behave properly. Only strong voices of modern times might have said something like this: only people who are like us. Perhaps another way to put this question is probably better worded for us today, because I don't think we're as consumed with entering the temple, is who is entitled to mercy? Who is entitled to God's mercy? That seems to be the real question before Matthew and before us postmoderns from this gospel reading this morning. They've been struggling with some of the same strong voices that they heard at that time that we hear at our time, voices that spoke of who was worthy to have mercy and who was not. We as people at this time and place who try to live into the kingdom of God here at this time and place struggle with similar questions. Is everyone entitled to mercy? Can everyone come to the temple? There are strong voices that say there are those who are not entitled to God's mercy. Who gets medical care? Who gets mental health assistance? Who gets a job? Who gets a place to live or something to eat? When they get out of jail, who gets a chance to start a new life? While many people and many organizations, including our own parish here at Olive Branch, work hard on these issues of social justice, we really need to look at this lesson that Jesus teaches us through Matthew's gospel about the Canaanite woman. They're real questions. They're not issues. They're real questions of real people with real lives. Let me say that again. They're not issues. They're real questions about real people with real lives. People with real names. People with real hopes, real disappointments, real dreams. Real people like the homeless people who live just up the block from us, near the bridge, who come to our parish and our food pantry for assistance. People like those who are disabled and ill, who stop by sometimes for prayers and to talk. People who are uninsured and undocumented, who go to mobile clinics every day to find medical care for diseases they have. Real people like the young street people and the working poor in our neighborhood who come to us for help and come to other agencies. The growing number of homeless and working poor in our area. Real people who also do not have ready access to food, to jobs, to medical care, to mental health care. Real people like the comedian Robin Williams, or the 3 people that our congregation experienced last year who took their lives because their brains were so diseased that they no longer could stand to exist. Real people with real problems in life. Is everyone entitled to mercy? In the past few weeks, I've heard these people, these real people, some of them adults, some of them teenagers, some of whom are children. And I've heard them referred to as cattle, referred to as rats, and worthless human beings. The city council recently convened a town hall meeting to talk about the growing problem of homelessness. And one of the things they had a flashpoint to was food pantries like ours, where the conversation said there's an increasing amount of young adults coming for their hunger needs. And we know we have a food pantry here, and I think our last food pantry we had 50-some families and helped 230 individuals with food. Besides that, our church helps other agencies like Hoop and Food Not Bombs provide food for people in the streets. Now, that meeting, those people who were speaking out against places like our ministry here, those special services in neighborhood, drew a comparison to feeding the homeless and those who are underfed and called them, these people are like feeding cattle. Is everyone entitled to mercy? Maybe you've seen recent articles nationally about the infestation of rats in downtown parking garages and city parks. Following one of those publications of those articles, citizens from a city council in another city who was actually on the homeless task force compared the homeless to rats. Is everyone entitled to mercy? And most recently, because of some of the violence, racial violence is going on, someone wrote a piece in a publication about the homeless and near homeless teenagers and about the poor. In the article, they labeled all homeless as worthless human beings. Is everyone entitled to mercy? We need to remember the Canaanite woman. Her cry for help came rejected 2 times, but finally she and her child were seen for children of God, which they were all along. And so I think because of that story and because of what I witnessed personally, we can't ignore this question that Matthew raises today. Who gets to enter the temple? Who gets God's mercy? As is the nature for clergy, I've never at any parish very long. 5 years is actually a long time for a disciple minister to be someplace. And I've met people in this congregation, other congregations I serve that have been around for 80 years and 60 years. Raise your hands if you've been around for 80 years, 60 years, 40 years, 20 years. When I see that, I'm reminded that us clergy types are short timers. The church is truly yours, so to speak. It doesn't belong to the clergy. And those of you who have long histories know far better than I that as a downtown type church, as an urban church, that we really need to have our doors open. You've shared with me before that we've had guests come and go. And we've had people here in our congregation that worship with us who live under the bridge or on a bench. And as the economy and the structures of our society continue to put pressure on homeless and working poor, we're likely to have more guests come either to our food pantry or to our worship looking for hope, looking for nurture, looking for love. At least I hope so. This week, in fact, when I was in town, I was speaking to some folks at the gas station, the BP, that's down the road here on Raymond Avenue. And often when I'm there, there'll be homeless people that'll walk up and ask you to buy them something. Anybody else go to BP that knows what I'm talking about? And I invited them to come to our church. These couple of guys. They said to me that they were afraid to come inside. So I kind of wondered, are they afraid because they don't know the rules? Or are they afraid because they don't know how to behave properly? Or are they afraid because they think we'll care about what they look like or who they are? And I wonder too, do we care about those things? You know, I hope they'll come to church someday. And I hope more of you will take opportunities to take a walk down Raymond or over in Fountain Square or wherever it is close to you, where those sidewalks and street where people who are desperate for hope live. I hope that we continue to be a house of prayer for all people. I'm always amazed on Christmas Eve when we have our Christmas vigil from 5 o'clock until 11 before we start our candlelight service. How many people that we never see, ever, wander here on Christmas Eve in complete silence to take communion and pray. Each Sunday as disciples, we come to the Lord's table with outstretched arms. We stand before the table, each one of us, really in the place of that Canaanite woman, saying, Son of David, have pity on me. Help me. Now for some of you, maybe those words don't resonate with your own needs today. If that's what you believe, I've got 2 things to say for you. First, congratulations on having a wonderful, perfect life. And second, you're probably fooling yourself or lying to yourself, because we all need God's mercy. But if you really can't say, Son of David, have pity on me, help me, maybe you can say those words for those people who are living on the street, for those people who are hungry, who are frightened, who are in need. Son of David, have mercy on me. Help me. For the destitute, for those who suffer from mental illness, for those who battle the demons of addiction, or selfishness, or greed, or self-righteousness. Because the reality is, none of God's children are dogs. None of God's children are cattle. None of God's children are rats. None of God's children are worthless human beings. And I hope we haven't created a society that thinks that's true. Psalm 139 says, If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I say, surely darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark for you. The night is as bright as the day, for the darkness is as light to you. This week, the curtain closed on the life of Robin Williams. Instead of taking a bow, he crumpled over a chair with a belt around his neck. It seems that the darkness covered him, that he couldn't find any light in the depths. You know, I loved Robin Williams and all the characters he represented. The English teacher, the father who dressed in drag so he could be with his kids, the charming genie, the 44 voices, the bright red clown nose, doctor who spread joy and hope. But that was the only Robin Williams that I really knew. See, he hid his sorrow so well that evidently none of us really thought about the fact that he was suffering from great depression. In faith communities, we struggle to talk about mental illness, depression, addiction, and suicide. But we've had people come to our door with those struggles. I've shared with some of you, or maybe many of you before, that a year or so ago, we had a family pull into our driveway when we were first arriving at church one morning, and they wanted to know if I could do a funeral. And I said, well, we need to take a look at the calendar to make sure I'm available, because they weren't church members. But what we found out is their son had committed suicide. I did that funeral, and at the end of the funeral, I had people coming to me from their family and shared with me that they had actually been to 3 other churches where ministers have said, we will do a funeral for you because they committed suicide. Is everyone entitled to mercy? Church folks are known for smiling on the outside, singing songs like Kumbaya, and offering cheap words when there's a loss. Like everything happens for a reason. Or God must have wanted them in heaven. Or worse, that mental illness and suicide is sin. These type of faithless responses are not helpful. In fact, they embarrass me. As a pastor, a counselor, a friend to those who struggle with the real issues, with real names and real things in life, and having been a huge fan of Robin Williams, I want you to take a different perspective on these people who live in pain. I mean, I wish there was a Kumbaya response to all the pain and chaos of mental illness, of racism, but there isn't. Instead, it's a long daily battle that we don't always conquer. There are no cheap hallmark phrases or shallow theology that can deter the tragedy of suicide, the tragedy of racism, the tragedy of violence. In our faith lives, I think we struggle to name what we know. We fight against unanswered questions and unresolved mysteries. We like answers, so we often provide them, even if they're not the right answer, just because we think we need to have an answer for everything. I stand before you letting you know that I do not know why darkness and suffering continue to capture people. Why darkness and suffering continue to capture communities around the world and in our nation every day and every minute. I'm not even sure what healing and redemption look like for those who have waited so long, who have hunger and have had violence committed against them, who live with injustice, who see prejudice because of who they are, who suffer with mental illness, and who end their life with suicide. Often these mysteries challenge me. They anger me. But I want to own up to my anger and to those challenges and my doubts and my questions, that someplace there's a faithfulness, there's a response from God. I don't believe everything that happens for a reason. I don't think that God sits up there in some poofy cloud and orchestrates everything for us, or endorses the brokenness that occurs in our world. And most importantly, after this week, I absolutely do not believe that someone who is struggling with mental illness will cause a result of sin.
Amen.
There's no place for righteousness in the face of someone who has suffered. Instead of trying to make theological sense about the darkness of our neighbors, we need to present those who struggle with listening ears, with caring and loving hearts, with embraces, with assurance, and by walking with them. This is what I do believe. There are dark places in this world, but since the beginning of time, God has been there with us. At the dawn of creation, God hovered over the darkness, and God's Spirit lingered over the dead. Genesis 1:2. God continues to show up in darkness again and again. Scriptures tell us that Job wept on a pile of ash in desperation when everything had been taken away from his family, his possessions. but God was there. The gospel shares with us that as Jesus' mother Mary wept into the ground at the grave of her child, God was there. As faithful people, we are called to do the same, to bear witness to suffering, to be safe havens and places of refuge for those who struggle. When I remember Robin Williams and others who have passed, I know that God created them and said, it is very, very good. I know that people suffocate in the darkness surrounds them, where there's hunger, mental illness, injustice, bigotry. But I also know that in that darkness, God is present there for them. And just as Jesus and God hover since the very beginning of time in the darkness, God is there at the last moment of our lives, with that last breath, surrounding us with arms wide open, ready to usher us to a place where there's no more pain, no more struggle, no more suffering, no more tears. I believe God is with those who are hungry. I believe God is with those who are ill. I believe that God is with those who are homeless, those who experience racism, and those who struggle with financial problems, those who struggle with relationships, those who struggle with mental illness, those who struggle with anything. God's light is still there. And we as Christians, followers of this Jesus, the one who embodied God in real life, invites us every day to be this experience for people in their struggles, in their darkness. We can walk with them. We can give them light. We can give them hope. Son of David, have pity on us. Help us. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Praise be to God.